RetroDaze.
It's interesting to go back to some of our favorite television shows and movies, only to realize the prominent role principals and other school administrators played in the lives of the main characters. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't even remember the names of my principals after elementary school. I guess if you were sent to the principal's office a lot, or conversely were an overachiever, you may have a much clearer memory of your school administrators.
In any event, such always seemed to be the case with main characters in pop culture, especially when those movies or television shows took place in or around a school. What follows is our definitive list of school principals in 1980s movies and TV. Some of the best teen movies of the 1980s were made by John Hughes, so it follows that at least a couple of his movies would birth iconic school administrators. One of the most memorable was Richard Dick Vernon, vice principal of Shermer High School, as well as the detention supervisor in The Breakfast Club. This was the type of person I always assumed lurked behind the cordial masks of my own high school administrators. Sure, some of Vernon's scenes were played for laughs, but underneath, he was a bomb with a lit fuse. He may have been out of touch and lame, which could make for some good laughs, but he also had one hell of a chip on his shoulder, and that led to some legitimately scary moments.
That's the last time, Bender. That's the last time you ever make me look bad in front of those kids. Do you hear me? I make $31,000 a year, and I've got a home, and I'm not about to throw it away on some punk like you. But someday, man, someday, when you're out of here and you've forgotten all about this place, and they've forgotten all about you, I'm gonna be there.
You threatening me?
What are you gonna do about it? You think anybody's gonna believe you? You think anybody is gonna take your word over mine? Get on your feet, pal. Let's find out how tough you are. Come on, I'll give you the first punch. Let's go. Just take one shot. That's what I thought. You're a gutless turd.
To a teenager watching this movie in the 80s, a school official threatening physical harm in an enclosed space was a terribly real horror. The score during this scene, as well as the understanding that even Bender, the resident tough guy, was scared, helped further instill fear in viewers. We're treated to a single reflective moment when Vernon speaks with Carl near the end of the movie, and in that scene we at least perhaps understand his own fears that these rebellious kids are the ones who will be taking care of them in their old age. As unfounded as those worries may be, it helps explain some of his actions, but absolutely does not justify them. Also lurking in the hallways of Shermer High, albeit in a different John Hughes movie, was the Dean of Students, Ed Rooney. It's speculated that the two administrators may have even worked at the school at the same time. Given that two other movies, 16 Candles and Weird Science, also took place at the same school, there's further suggestion that some of the students may have known each other. According to Adrienne Tyler for Screen Rant, Hughes said Ferris Bueller knew Samantha Baker from 16 Candles, who was a sophomore during the events of her movie. 16 Candles was released in 1984, so it makes sense that she and Ferris would know each other. In that same interview, Hughes said The Breakfast Club's John Bender lived 2 doors away from Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
I never did introduce myself. Del Griffith, American Light and Fixture, Director of Sales, Shower Curtain Ring Division. I sell shower curtain rings.
Like Dick Vernon, Rooney is overbearingly strict. His entire storyline circulates around his desire to catch Ferris, resulting in the Dean of Students actually pursuing Ferris outside school grounds and even attempting to break into his house.
Ferris Bueller.
Of course, nearly every one of Rooney's scenes is played for laughs, despite the severity of his actions. He's just a punching bag for Ferris's antics, and I have to say I love watching him get his comeuppance time and time again, especially given the actor's real-world transgressions.
I'm assistant principal here, as you've probably noticed from the indications on the door.
This door?
The outer door.
The outer door?
Yes.
Because there's nothing on this one.
That's just about enough of that.
Sorry.
I've been an educator for 31.3 years, and in that time, I've seen a lot of bad eggs. I see a bad egg when I look at your niece. She is a twiddler, a dreamer, a silly heart. She is a jabberbox. And frankly, I don't think she takes a thing in her life or her career as a student seriously.
She's only 6.
Yet another stern assistant principal found in a John Hughes movie is Mrs. Anita Hogarth, depicted by Suzanne Shepherd in the movie Uncle Buck. We don't get much time with Anita, but what we do see of her reinforces our trust in Uncle Buck, who supports his niece, and our dislike of the assistant principal, who displays only a desire to kill the imagination of her young students. While Uncle Buck is rather mean to her and certainly could have made his point without resorting to low blows, I don't know a single person who has watched this scene and felt bad for Anita Hogarth.
The doc said all his clock's 25 minutes slow.
Doc, am I to understand you're still hanging around with Dr. Emmett Brown McFly? Hearty slip for you, Miss Parker. And one for you, McFly. I believe that makes 4 in a row. Now let me give you Nichols' worth of free advice, young man. This so-called Dr. Brown is dangerous. He's a real nutcase. You hang around with him, you're going to end up in big trouble.
Oh, yes, sir.
You've got a real attitude problem, McFly. You're a slacker. You remind me of your father when he went here. He was a slacker, too.
Meanwhile, outside the John Hughes universe, there was still a whole host of tyrants like Principal Strickland from Back to the Future. Considering the expansive nature of the trilogy, novelizations, video games, and other related media, we know more about Stanford S. Strickland, Gerald Strickland in the novel, than any of the other characters on today's list, including a full biography and family history going back to his grandfather, Chief Marshal James Strickland, in Back to the Future Part 3. Among other things, we learn that Principal Strickland's stern nature was a familial trait, and his grandfather was also humorless and uncompromising. In Back to the Future Part 3, however, his grandfather's ire was mostly reserved for Buford Mad Dog Tannen. Strickland particularly had a problem with slackers, an insult Strickland would utter to multiple McFlys across the timelines, and always a fun callback in the movies. In a deleted scene, he even leaves George McFly trapped in a payphone where he'd been deposited by bullies, opting to simply call him a slacker before walking away. A favorite moment of mine is Mr. Strickland in the alternate 1985 timeline, where he's become hard as nails and totes around a shotgun.
It can't be.
Drop it. So you're the son of a bitch who's been stealing my newspapers.
Mr. Strickland! Mr. Strickland. It's me, sir. It's Marty.
Who?
Marty McFly! Marty McFly! Don't you know me, sir, from school, sir?
I've never seen you before in my life, but you look to me like a slacker.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, I am a slacker. Don't you remember you gave me detention last week?
Last week, the school burnt down 6 years ago.
Hey, Strickland!
Of course, we also get to see a slightly nicer Strickland, at least to the McFlys, after Marty helps his father change the past, an alteration that apparently convinces Strickland that perhaps those McFlys aren't so bad after all.
Hold it! Now you've done it. You don't know how long I have waited to get you right where I have you. You're never going to play basketball again. You know why? Because you're not going to be here anymore. That's why. You're out of here, Mr. Howard. And don't you try to... going home, son. Go ahead. I'll handle this.
5 weeks after Back to the Future was released, Michael J. Fox was once again tangling with a stern school administrator, Vice Principal Thorne, in the movie Teen Wolf. I don't know what it was about 1980s media, but principals and other school staff were often depicted as petty, judgmental, obsessive, and even vengeful. They'd fixate on a student or group of students and then do everything in their power to make them miserable. I guess, looking back, that's maybe how a lot of us thought of our own school disciplinarians, and that somewhat biased point of view made it into scripts, further solidifying this idea in young viewers. However it was, Vice Principal Thorne was just as bad as the other characters we've discussed today. He had it out for that Scott Howard, played by Michael J. Fox, from the get-go. Their first encounter in the school's hallway shows Thorne to be mildly sadistic, his very smile portraying contempt, and his offhand remark about Scott's missed shot in the basketball game a petty dig. In this case, we do get some backstory about why Rusty Thorne is so hard on Scott, and without getting too far into spoiler territory, we'll just say it had something to do with a run-in with Scott's father, Howard, when he and Rusty were younger. Still, I wouldn't say this epiphany excuses Thorne's behavior, though it does help explain his strange obsession with seeing Scott fail. Not all administrators in 80s media were authoritarians, and perhaps the best example of that, even though the sitcom aired into the 90s, is Principal Belding from Saved by the Bell. Unlike most of the other characters we've covered on this list, Principal Belding had a better rapport with his students and generally seemed to care. As the school's main authority figure, he would still often play the role of antagonist, entering a room while uttering his catchphrase,
Hey, what is going on here? 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 Hey, what is going on here?
Nothing a black eye couldn't fix.
But even the inflection of his voice would often emote concern rather than aggression. Viewers mostly believed he was looking out for his students' welfare and not just looking to throw them into detention for kicks. Some of this might be due to his own background as a rebel in high school. According to the Saved by the Bell wiki, he had worked in the school's radio station where he made broadcasts about how the students of the era felt about authority and formal education, but earned him enmity between himself and the headmaster. He engaged in acts of rebellion, such as mooning the faculty, which Jessica Spano later remarked that Belding was the Zach Morris of the 1960s. The flashbacks showing Mr. Belding as the Big Bopper are some of my favorite moments because we get a clear glimpse of the teenage rebel he once was. All of these things combined make for an effective principal who cares about his students, which also often leads to hilarious moments.
We at the testing board have discovered that those students who score over 1,501 on our test are performing terribly in college.
They are?
Yes, because unenlightened, putty-headed principals are burning out these bright minds with extra work. Hopefully that's not happening here, is it?
See, I thought that you had to challenge a mind like that.
Precisely wrong! Only a misguided twit would burden a brain like his with extra studies.
Or what should I do?
Give him no homework. Allow his mind to think freely. That is, of course, if you care. I care. I care.
As something of a bonus entry, we have our favorite animated principal of the 1980s and beyond, Principal Skinner.
Please excuse my handwriting. I busted whichever hand it is I write with. Signed, Mrs. Simpson. You were right to be suspicious, Edna. To the crime lab. Inconclusive. I wish more students had agreed to these electronic tracking implants. We only had one volunteer. If I were a truant boy out for a good time, I'd be right here, the Springfield Natural History Museum. You're mine, Simpson. Why, there are no children here at the 4-H club either. Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
Skinner is the principal we love to hate. Initially viewed only through the POV of Bart and the other students of Springfield Elementary School, we eventually also get some Skinner-centric episodes filled with backstory.
Other principals try to unload problem cases that way. Lord knows I do.
I'm a good student, Principal Skinner.
Yeah, sure, and they told me I'd get a big parade when I got back from Nam. Instead, they spat on me. I can still feel it searing. So, let's just see what the permanent record has to say, shall we? No detention? Fairly good attendance record. Oh, I see you beat that bedwetting problem in the 2nd grade.
That's in there?
Don't worry, they'll forget. Just like they forgot about me in that tiger cage for 18 agonizing months.
Though mostly played for laughs, his past service in the Army, as well as his relationship with his mother, helped to paint a fuller picture of Principal Skinner.
Now, as we worked on this episode, I kept thinking about other great administrators from popular media, only to realize they were from movies and television shows that took place in the 1990s. Characters like Miss Musso from Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Mr. Feeney, who eventually becomes principal of John Adams High School in Boy Meets World, and Principal Angela Lee from Daria. Now, of course, you know that just means we'll have to revisit this topic in the future and fill in all the blanks. Speaking of which, what other 1980s school administrators did you enjoy watching in movies and television? Who were your favorites? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments, and if you enjoy our content, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even activating that ubiquitous notification bell. It really does make a huge difference. Let's meet again next week to celebrate Yesteryear, right here on RetroDaze.
Clicky clacky.